This video is sponsored by DistroKid. If you find that the sounds of your mix are clashing and getting in the way of each other, and instead want to achieve more clarity and separation, then chances are you need to reduce frequency masking taking place between them. If you didn't know, frequency masking happens when two sounds with similar frequency content overlap and ultimately get in the way of each other. This is bad because it can lead to a muddy and unclear mix where individual instruments lose their definition and impact, making it difficult to distinguish between them. I find there are two common situations where I'm treating frequency masking in a mix. The first is within the low end, particularly between sounds like the kick and the bass. And the second is between competing sounds in the mid-range, such as guitars, synths, pianos, and vocals, to name a few. Now, I've talked at great length about solving frequency masking with a variety of different tools in my past videos, but I recently stumbled onto another tool that I think might be the perfect one for this job, and that is Izotope's Neutron 5. I specifically rely on Neutron 5's equalizer and unmask modules to treat frequency masking, and I find them helpful for a few reasons. One, the equalizer quickly and easily highlights frequency masking between two competing sounds with some simple routing. Two, I could treat masking manually within the equalizer directly, or use the unmask module to automatically unmask my mix quickly and easily. Three, within both modules, I could treat masking not only in the standard stereo mode, but also in a mid-side or even a transient sustain mode. That means I can affect the masked frequency exactly in the situation that it's most problematic in, while maintaining maximum transparency. These are really just a few of my favorite features of this plugin, and in this video, I want to explore specifically using Neutron 5 to treat those two problems that I mentioned earlier. And because each situation is unique, I'll be taking advantage of specific features of Neutron 5 that are going to be different in each scenario. So it's not going to be two of the same tutorial back to back. I'll be approaching each of them slightly differently, as you're going to find out soon enough. If you're curious to check out Neutron 5 for yourself, I'll also leave links to it down in the description below. But before we dive into this tutorial, I gotta pay the bills and make sure that Piper has some food in her bowl. And if you're an artist releasing music, chances are you do too. And that's where the sponsor of today's video, DistroKid, enters the chat. They give you access to what you need to distribute your music on streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, and they pass on 100% of the earnings generated from your music directly to you. Not on a desktop? Don't worry. You can even distribute your music directly from your phone with the DistroKid app available on iPhone and Android. Their interface is clean and simple, making uploading a breeze and giving you tons of options such as the ability to Shazam your music for improved discoverability. But DistroKid offers so much more than just getting your music out there easily. It has tons of creative tools built right in to help you create exciting marketing materials to support your release. This includes the meme video generator to create funny and relevant short form content, and the Spotify canvas generator so your music has some sleek visuals running in the background on the app, among others. Best of all, unlike many other distributors that charge you per release or keep a percentage of your music earnings, DistroKid charges a low annual subscription fee for you to distribute unlimited music for the year, making them much more convenient and less expensive than the other guys. There's a reason why over 2 million artists rely on DistroKid to distribute their music, including yours truly. If you're interested in signing up, you can save 7% off your first year by using my link down in the description below. Let's begin by taking a look at the kick and bass that are clashing in this mix, and manually fix the frequency masking taking place between them with Neutron 5's equalizer. Afterwards, in the second example, we'll switch it up and use the unmask module instead. We'll start by putting an instance of Neutron 5's equalizer on each sound in question. I'm specifically going to focus on the instance on the bass in particular. Next, we're going to open up the masking menu by clicking on the masking button in the corner of the interface, and then from there, we're going to make sure that we select the opposite instance of the equalizer, being the kick equalizer. Now we can play the track and analyze the overlap taking place between these two sounds, with masked areas being highlighted in orange on the interface. Notice how the area was being highlighted somewhere between 20 Hz and 500 Hz. And also notice how it only highlighted the area when both sounds were playing simultaneously. There was a few moments where the kick was playing without the bass, and it wasn't showing any masking taking place. Now from here, we need to decide which of these two sounds we want to take priority. And in my case, that's typically going to be the kick because I want the kick to drive the rhythm. So to make sure that it does that, we need to make sure that we have a sidechain set up on our kick to send some signal. And then on the instance of Neutron that's on our bass, we want to make sure that it's receiving that signal as a key input or a sidechain input. Now to take this up a notch, we're actually going to switch from the stereo mode, which is the default mode, into transient sustain mode. This is essentially going to allow us to manipulate the frequency information of the transient and sustain uniquely. With this in mind, we really only need the kick to punch through over top of the transient of the bass, whereas the bass, which I could scroll down to reveal the individual track feeding the master or group that we're feeding up to, you can see it's really acting as the sustain, playing throughout, while as the kick just quickly accentuates the initial hit of each each part, basically acting as the rhythm. Therefore, what we're going to do here is only going to affect the transient of the bass, but preserve its sustain, making this move that we're about to do a lot less intrusive or destructive. Back to the EQ on our bass, you can see that I initially clicked and created a band where that frequency masking is taking place, at least one of the main parts, which is highlighted in a darker color of orange. I'm going to change this from a proportional cue to a band shelf, so that way we can affect a wider area, since again we want to affect between 20 and 500 hertz roughly. But to make sure that we set this up in a dynamic, less intrusive way, we're going to expand the menu here and enable the dynamic mode, and then we're also going to enable the sidechain and set it to the external. Therefore, the external sidechain, being the kick, is going to trigger this to reduce. But before we can do that, we need to fine-tune a couple of settings, including the threshold and the gain. Our kick needs to pass the threshold first and foremost, and then our gain in this case in dynamic mode is really going to act like a range, or the maximum amount of reduction that can take place. Usually I'm going to set this to at least -2, but sometimes greater than that, -3, -4, -6. It really depends on how much we need in order to create less congestion between these two sounds. But let's evaluate what this sounds like with a setting of -3 and a very low threshold, and I can fine tune it as it plays as well. And my initial settings actually felt pretty good. I just had to adjust the cue to make sure that we're affecting the correct amount of area, as it was pretty narrow to start. And if you're really concerned with what you're losing, you can engage the delta on the bass, for example, play the track, and you're only going to hear what's being reduced as a result of this process. True to its name, you can really hear that it's just affecting the initial start or transient, that beginning moment of the bass every single time, which isn't really noticeable because the kick is filling in that void, and this is ultimately allowing the kick to take that priority. You're hearing a fullness and increase in that lower end range of the kick in particular, and it's also reducing masking in the process, leading to a much clearer mix with a bit more separation and definition between these two often competing elements. Let's now shift gears and take a look at reducing frequency masking between a vocal and some mid-range instruments that are creeping up and getting in the way of it. And unlike the previous example, we're going to specifically be using Neutron's Unmask module. But with the Unmask module, we don't really have to do any of the identification or a lot of that manual work from the previous step. Instead, we can put an instance on one of the two sounds that are competing. And in this case, I have it being applied to my all instrument master, which contains all of the melodic mid-range instruments that feed into my instrumental. From there, just like the previous example, we need to route the sidechain to receive signal from the sound you want to dominate. And in my case, that's this main box sidechain here, which you can see I have a send routed from the chorus here. So just like the kick before, the vocal in this case is going to trigger that reduction on the mask frequencies within the mid-range element specifically. Next, all we have to do is drive up the amount setting, and you're going to see that Neutron automatically identifies and reduces the presence of mask frequencies based on the sidechain input. Let's try it out.
On my way to the shadow, taking no risk, no buckle. If something goes wrong, I fear I might not make it, but I did try. At the end, light shines out the tunnel. All bets on me like 00. Haven't lost my hope. If it rains like this, I know the sun gon' shine. On my way to the shadow, taking no risk, no buckle. If something goes wrong, I fear I might not make it, but I did try. At the end, light shines out the tunnel. All bets on me like 00. Haven't lost my hope. If it rains like this, I know the sun gon' shine.
So right here with a setting of about 38% seems to be a pretty good starting point. And while of course we could leave it here, I do think it's worth exploring the other settings to fine tune this just a little bit more. And the first thing I would adjust is taking this out of the stereo mode, that's the default mode it starts with, and flipping it into a mid-side mode instead. Similar to the transient sustain mode, this is going to allow us to manipulate the mid and side channels uniquely. And me, I want this process to be as minimally intrusive as possible. Before in the stereo mode, it was affecting both the mid and side channels equally essentially because it's affecting the entire stereo stereo field. But if you notice, vocals are often mono sources, just like this vocal is here. It was recorded on one microphone, and that microphone is panned right down the middle. Therefore, I really only need to make space in the middle of the track and not necessarily the sides. So by doing this, I'm essentially going to be able to preserve the presence of the mid-range instruments in the side channel and make room for the vocal where it really lives, which is going to be in the mid. This is ultimately going to sound a lot more transparent and just more natural in general. Something else we can do is adjust the range selectors here, being the low and the high band, as you can see. And this will essentially set up some boundaries to make sure that the masking is dealt with in the mid-range where it's really taking place, while not affecting the low and high frequencies where there really isn't any masking taking place at all. You can tell there wasn't a whole lot of processing happening there anyways, but this is just one extra step we could take to really focus this masking correction. Finally, we can also sculpt the overall reaction by manipulating the sensitivity, attack, and release. Sensitivity is ultimately like a threshold, with a lower setting producing less of a reaction, potentially with no reaction taking place at 0%, whereas a high setting such as 100 will produce a much more exaggerated gain reduction reaction. And you can quantify that reaction by paying attention to the numbers on the right side of the interface as well if you didn't notice earlier. Attack and release are standard as you would expect, with the attack affecting how quickly the unmasking process takes place once the threshold is passed, and the release determining how quickly it lets go once it falls below the threshold. I typically lean towards using faster attack and release settings period, so that way the priority sound, being the vocal in this case, is able to quickly dominate once it comes in, but also doesn't keep the secondary sound, being those mid-range instruments, reduced for too long once the vocal is no longer being performed. So let's make adjustments to all of these in one go and see where we end up.
On my way to the shadow, taking all risks, no buckle. If something goes wrong, I fear I might not make it, but I did try. At the end, light shines at the tunnel. All bets on me like 00. Haven't lost my hope. If it rains like this, I know the sun gon' shine. On my way to the shadow, taking all risks, no buckle. If something goes wrong, I fear I might not make it, but I did try. At the end, light shines at the tunnel. All bets on me like 00. Haven't lost my hope. If it rains like this, I know the sun gon' shine. On my way to the shadow, taking all risks, no buckle. If something goes wrong, I fear I might not make it, but I did try. At the end, light shines at the tunnel. On my way to the shadow, taking all risks, no buckle. If something goes wrong, I fear I might not make it, but I did try. At the end, light shines at the tunnel. All bets on me like 00. Haven't lost my hope. If it rains like this, I know the sun gon' shine.
And these changes seem to be appropriate, allowing us to dial in a much more focused sound that doesn't necessarily affect the low and high frequencies, but still ensuring that the vocal maintains that dominant upfront position, especially when the mid-range sounds creep up and begin to interfere. Overall, this is very subtle at the same time. It's not totally killing our mid-range instruments, but it's just allowing our vocal to take that upfront position when they seem to creep up and get in the way, ultimately reducing masking between them. Now, I focused on two specific problems here, but the reality is frequency masking can take place throughout your mix from high to low end and anywhere in between. Luckily, these tools and processes can be applied no matter where the issue lives. And if you want to see another video I did about solving frequency masking with a tool that's actually cheaper than Neutron 5, click the card you see on screen to watch that next. I'll also leave some of my best frequency masking videos on the other side of the screen for you to watch as well. If you got value out of the video, please give it a like so it can reach more people like yourself. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing so you can see more mixing tips like this in the future. I appreciate y'all for watching and look forward to helping y'all again soon. Peace.
5